All right, hello, my name is Heather Wolfe, and this is part 2 of Chapter 1 of What We Find by Robin Carr. The people who ventured there ranged from hikers to bikers to cross-country skiers, boating enthusiasts, rock climbers, fishermen, nature lovers, and weekend campers. Plenty of hikers went out on the trails for a day, a few days, a week, or even longer. Hikers who were taking on the CDT or the Colorado Trail often planned on Sully's as a stopping point to resupply, rest, and get cleaned up. Those hardies were called the through hikers, as the Continental Divide Trail was 3,100 miles long while the Colorado Trail was almost 500, but the two trails converge for about 200 miles just west of Sully's. Thus, Sully's was often referred to as the crossing. People who knew the place referred to it as Sully's. Some of their campers were one-timers, never seen again. Many were regulars, within an easy drive looking for a weekend or holiday escape. They were all interesting to Maggie. Men, women, young, old, athletes, wannabe athletes, scout troops, nature clubs, weirdos, the occasional creep, but the ones who intrigued her the most were the long-distance hikers, the through hikers. She couldn't imagine the kind of commitment needed to take on the CDT, not to mention the courage and strength. She loved to hear their stories about everything from wildlife on the trail to how many toenails they'd lost on their journey. There were tables and chairs on the store's wide front porch, and people tended to hang out there whether the store was open or closed. When the weather was warm, and fair, there were spontaneous gatherings and campfires at the edge of the lake. Long-distance hikers often mailed themselves packages. They held dry socks, extra food supplies, a little cash, maybe even a book, first aid items, a new lighter for their campfires, a fresh shirt or two. Maggie loved to watch them retrieve and open boxes they'd packed themselves. It was like Christmas. Sully had a great big map of the CDT, Colorado Trail, and other trails on the bulletin board in the front of the store. It was surrounded by pictures, either left or sent back to him. He put out a journal book where hikers could leave news or messages. The journals, when filled, were kept by Sully and had become very well known. People could spend hours reading through them. Sully's was an escape, a refuge, a gathering place, a recreational outpost. Maggie and Andrew liked to come for the occasional weekend to ski. The cross-country trails were safe and well-marked. Occupancy was lower during the winter months, so they'd take a cabin, and Sully would never comment on the fact that they were sharing not just a room, but a bed. Before the pregnancy and miscarriage, their routine had been rejuvenating. They'd knock themselves out for a week or even a few weeks in their separate cities, then get together for a weekend or a few days, eat wonderful food, screw their brains out, get a little exercise in the outdoors, have long and deep conversations, meet up with friends, then go back to their separate worlds. Andrew was shy of marriage, having failed at one and being left a single father. Maggie, too, had had a brief, unsuccessful marriage, but she wasn't afraid of trying again and had always thought Andrew would eventually get over it. She accepted the fact that she might not have children, coupled with a man who, right up front, declared he didn't want more. But then there was one on the way, and does he step up? She muttered to herself as she walked into the store through the back door. He complains that I'm too sad for him to deal with. The bastard. Who's the bastard, darling? Enid asked from the kitchen. She stuck her head out just as Maggie was climbing onto a stool at the counter and smiled. It's so good to see you. It's been a while. I know. I'm sorry about that. It's been harrowing in Denver. I'm sure Dad told you about all that mess with my practice. He did. Those awful doctors tricking people into thinking they needed surgery on their backs and everything. Is one of them the bastard? Without a doubt, she answered, though they hadn't been on her mind at all. In that lawsuit against you, Enid reminded her. Sking. They'll probably go away. Maggie said hopefully, though there was absolutely no indication it would. At least it was civil. The DA had found no cause to indict her. But really, how much is one girl supposed to take? The event leading to the lawsuit was one of the most horrific nights she'd ever been through in the ER. 5 teenage boys in a catastrophic car wreck, all critical. She spent a lot of time in the stairwell after that one. I'm not worried, she lied. Then she had to concentrate to keep from shuddering. Good for you. I have soup. I made some for your dad and Frank. Mushroom with cheese toast. There's plenty if you're interested. Yes, please, she said. I'll get it. Enid went around the corner to dish it up. The store didn't have a big kitchen, just a little turning around room. It was in the southwest corner of the store. There was a bar and 4 stools right beside the cash register. On the northwest corner there was a small bar where they served adult beverages, and again a bar and 4 stools. No one had ever wanted to attempt a restaurant, but it was a good idea to provide food and drink. Campers and hikers tended to run out of supplies. Sully sold beer, wine, soft drinks, and bottled water in the cooler section of the store, but he didn't sell bottled liquor. For that matter, he wasn't a grocery store, but a general store. Along with the foodstuffs, there were t-shirts, socks, and a few other recreational supplies like rope, clamps, batteries, hats, sunscreen, first aid supplies. For the mother lode, you had to go to Timberlake, Leadville, or maybe Colorado Springs. In addition to tables and chairs on the porch, there were a few comfortable chairs just inside the front door, where the pot-bellied stove sat. Meg remembered when she was a little girl, men sat on beer barrels around the stove. There was a giant ice machine on the back porch. The ice was free. Enid stuck her head out of the little kitchen. She bleached her hair blonde, but had always, for as long as Maggie could remember, had black roots. She was plump and nurturing, while her husband Frank was one of those grizzled, skinny old ranchers. Is that nice Dr. Matthews coming down on the weekend? Enid asked. I broke up with him. Don't ever call him nice again, Maggie said. He's a turd. Oh, honey, you broke up? He said I was depressing, she said with a pout. He can kiss my ass. Well, I should say so. I never liked him very much. Did I mention that? No, you didn't. You said you loved him and thought we'd make handsome children together. She winced as she said it. Obviously, I wasn't thinking, Enid said, withdrawing back into the kitchen. In a moment she brought out a bowl of soup and a thick slice of cheese toast. Her soup was cream of mushroom, and it was made with real cream. Maggie dipped her spoon into the soup, blew on it, tasted it. It was heaven. Why aren't you my mother? She asked. I just didn't have the chance, that's all. But we'll pretend. Maggie and Enid had that little exchange all the time, exactly like that. Maggie had always wanted one of those soft, nurturing, homespun types for a mother instead of Phoebe, who was thin, chic, active in society, snobby and prissy. Phoebe was cool, while Enid was warm and cuddly. Phoebe could read the hell out of a menu, while Enid could cure anything with her chicken soup, her grandmother's recipe. Phoebe rarely cooked, and when she did, it didn't go well. But lest Maggie completely throw her mother under the bus, she reminded herself that Phoebe had a quick wit. And though she was sarcastic and ironic, she could make Maggie laugh. She was devoted to Maggie and craved her loyalty, especially that Maggie liked her more than she liked Sully. She gave Maggie everything she had to give. It wasn't Phoebe's fault they were not the things Maggie wanted. For example, Phoebe sent Maggie to an extremely good college prep boarding school that had worked out on many levels, except that Maggie would have traded it all to live with her father. Foolishly, perhaps, but still. And all to live. And while Phoebe would not visit Sully's campground under pain of death, she had thrown Maggie a $50,000 wedding that Maggie hadn't wanted, and Walter had given her and Sergei a trip to Europe for that honeymoon. Maggie had appreciated the trip to Europe quite a lot, but she should never have married Sergei. She'd been very busy and distracted, and he was handsome, sexy, especially that accent. They looked so good together. She took him at face value and failed to look deeper into the man. He was superficial and not trustworthy. Fortunately, it would not be unfortunately. It had been blessedly short 9 months. This is so good, Maggie said. Your soup is always puts me right. How long are you staying, honey? I'm not sure. Till I get a better idea. A couple of weeks, maybe. Ina shook her head. You shouldn't come in March. You should know better than to come in March. He's going to work me like a pack of mules, isn't he? No question about it. Only person who isn't afraid to come around in March is Frank. Sully won't put Frank to work. Frank Masterson was one of Sully's cronies. He was about the same age, while Enid was just 55. Frank said he had had the foresight to marry a younger woman, thereby assuring himself a good caretaker for his old age. Frank owned a nearby cattle ranch that these days was just about taken over by his 2 sons, which freed up Frank to hang out around Sully's. Sometimes Sully would ask, "Why don't you just come to work with Enid in the morning and save the gas, since all you do is drink my coffee for free and butt into everyone's business?" When the weather was cold, he'd sit inside near the stove. When the weather was decent, he favored the porch. He wandered around, chatted it up with campers or folks who stopped by, occasionally lifted a heavy box for Enid, read the paper a lot. He was a fixture. Enid had a sweet heart-shaped face to go with her plump body. It attested to her love of baking. Besides, baking and wrapping sandwiches to keep in the cooler along with a few other lunchable items. She baked every morning, sweet rolls, buns, cookies, brownies, that sort of thing. Frank ate a lot of that and apparently never gained an ounce. Maggie could hear Sully scraping out the gutters around the store, 70 and up on a ladder, still working like a farmhand, cleaning the winter detritus away. That was the problem with March, a lot to clean up for the spring and summer. She escaped out to the porch to visit with Frank before Sully saw her sitting around and put her to work. "What are you doing here?" Frank asked. "I'm on vacation," she said. Damn fool. Time of year to take a vacation. Ain't nothing to do now. Dr. Matthews coming?" "No, we're not seeing each other anymore." That why you're here during mud season, licking your wounds?" "Not at all. I'm happy about it." "Yep, you look happy, all right." "I might be better off cleaning gutters," she thought. She turned the conversation to politics because she knew Frank had some very strong opinions and she could listen rather than answer questions. She spotted that guy again, the camper sitting in his canvas camper chair outside the pop-up tent or trailer under a pull-out awning. His legs were stretched out and he was reading again. She noticed he had long legs. She was just about to ask Frank how long that guy had been camping there when she noticed someone heading up the trail toward the camp. He had a big backpack and walking stick and something strange on his head. Maggie squinted. A bombardier's leather helmet with ear flaps. Frank, look at that, she said, leaning forward to stare. The man was old, but old wasn't exactly rare. There were a lot of senior citizens on the trails, hiking, biking, skiing. In fact, if they were fit at retirement, they had the time and means. As the man got closer, age was only part of the issue. I must find Sully, Frank said, getting up and going into the store. As the man drew near, it was apparent he wore rolled-up dress slacks, black socks, and black shoes, and looked like they'd be shiny church or office wear once the mud was cleaned off, and on his head a weird World War II aviator's hat. He wore a ski jacket that looked to be drenched, and he was flushed and limping. Sully appeared on the porch, Bo wagging at his side, Frank following. What the hell? Yeah, that's just wrong, Maggie said. You think? Sully asked. He went down the steps to approach the man, Maggie close on his heels, Frank bringing up the rear, and Enid on the porch waiting to see what was up. Well there, buddy, Sully said, his hands in his pockets. Where you headed? It's this Camp Lejeune. Everyone exchanged glances. That would be in North Carolina, son, Sully said, though the man was clearly older than Sully. You're a little off track. Come up on the porch and have a cup of coffee. Take off that pack and wet jacket and that silly hat, for God's sake. We need to make a phone call for you. What are you doing out here, soaking wet in your Sunday shoes? Maybe I should wait a while, see if they come, the man said, though he let himself be escorted to the porch. Who? Maggie asked. My parents and older brother, he said. I'm to meet them here. Bet they have some really funny hats, too? Frank muttered. Seems like you got a little confused, Sully said. What's your name again, young man? That's a problem, isn't it? I'll have to think on that for a while. Maggie noticed the camper had wandered off, over-curious. Up close he was distracting. He was tall and handsome, though there was a small bump on the bridge of his nose, but his hips were narrow, his shoulders wide, and his jeans were torn and frayed exactly right. They met glances. She tore her eyes away. Do you know how you got all wet? Did you walk through last night's rain? Sleep in the rain? Sully asked. I fell in a creek, he said. He smiled, though he also shivered. On account of those shoes, Frank pointed out. He slipped 'cause he ain't got no tread. Well, there you go, Maggie said. Professor Frank has it all figured out. Let's get that wet jacket off and get a blanket. Sully, you better call Stan the man. Will do. Anyone need a hand net here? Maggie heard the camper ask. Can you grab the phone, Cal? Sully asked. Sully put the man in what had been Maggie's chair and started peeling off his jacket and outer clothes. He leaned the backpack against the porch rail, and within just seconds Enid was there with a blanket, cup of coffee, and one of her bran muffins. Cal brought the cordless phone to the porch. The gentleman immediately began to devour that muffin as Maggie looked him over. Least he'll be regular, Frank said, reclaiming his chair. Maggie crouched in front of the man, and while speaking very softly, she asked if she could remove the hat. Before quite getting permission, she pulled it gently off his head to reveal wispy white hair surrounding a bald dome. She gently ran her fingers around his scalp in search of a bump or contusion. Then she pulled him to his feet and ran her hands around his torso and waist. You must have rolled around in the dirt, sir, she said. I bet you're ready for a shower. He didn't respond. Sir, anything hurt? She asked him. He just shook his head. Can you smile for me? Big wide smile? She asked, checking for the kind of paralysis caused by a stroke. Where'd you escape from, young man? Sully asked him. Where's your home? Wakefield, Illinois, he said. You know it? Can't say I do, Sully said. But I bet it's beautiful. More beautiful than Lejeune for sure. Can I have cream? He asked, holding out his cup. Enid took it. Of course you can, sweetheart, she said. I'll bring it right back. In a moment, the gentleman sat with his coffee with cream, shivering under a blanket, while Sully called Stan Branowski. There were a number of people Sully could have reached out to, a local ranger, state police, aka highway patrol, even fire and rescue. But Stan was the son of a local rancher and was the police chief in Timberlake, just 20 miles south and near the interchange. It was a small department with a clever deputy who worked the internet like a pro, Officer Paul Castor. Bo gave the old man a good sniffing, then moved down the stairs to Cal, who automatically began petting him. Sully handed the phone to Maggie. Stan wants to talk to you. He sounds like someone who wandered off, Stan said to Maggie, but I don't have any missing persons from nearby. I'll get Castor looking into it. I'm on my way. Does he have any ID on him? We haven't really checked yet, Maggie said into the phone. Why don't I do that while you drive? Here, Sully. Maggie handed the phone back to her and said, pass the time with Stan while I chat with this gentleman. Maggie asked the man to stand again and deftly slid a thin wallet out of his back pocket. She urged him to sit and opened it up. Well now, she said. Mr. Gunderson? Roy Gunderson? He said, his eyes lightening up a bit. Sully repeated the name into the phone to Stan. And so, Roy, did you hurt anything when you fell? Maggie asked. He shook his head and sipped his coffee. I fell, he finally asked. Maggie looked at Sully, lifting a questioning brow. A Mr. Gunnison from Park City, Utah, Sully said, wandered off from his home a few days ago, on foot. He must have gotten a ride or something, Cal said. His driver's license, which was supposed to be renewed 10 years ago, says his address is in Illinois. Stan says he'll probably have more information by the time he gets here, but this must be him. Dementia, he says. You can say that again, Maggie observed. I can't imagine what the last few days have been like for him. He must have been terrified. He looked terrified to you? Frank asked. He might as well be on a cruise ship. Tell Stan we'll take care of him till he gets here. Maggie went about the business of caring for Mr. Gunderson, getting water and a little soup into him, while the camper Cal chatted with Sully and Frank, apparently well known to them. When this situation was resolved, she meant to find out more about him, like how long he'd been here. She took off Roy's shoes and socks and looked at his feet. No injuries or frostbite, but some serious swelling and bruised toenails. She wondered where he had been and how he'd gotten the backpack. It certainly hadn't brought it from home or packed it himself. That would be too complicated for a man in his condition. It was a miracle he could carry it. 2 hours later, the sun lowered in the sky. An ambulance had arrived for Roy Gunderson. He didn't appear to be seriously injured or ill, but he was definitely unstable, and Stan wasn't inclined to transport him alone. He could bolt, trying to get out of a moving car or interfere with the driver, although Stan had a divider cage in his police car. What Maggie and Sully had learned, no thanks to Roy himself, was that he'd been cared for at home by his wife, wandered off without his GPS bracelet, walked around a while before coming upon a rather old Chevy sedan with the keys in the ignition, so he must have helped himself. The car was reported stolen from near his house, but had no tracking device installed, and since Mr. Gunderson hadn't driven in years, no one put him with the borrowed motor vehicle for a couple of days. The car was found abandoned near Salt Lake City with Roy's jacket in it. From there, the old man had probably hitched a ride. His condition was too good to have walked for days. Roy was likely left near a rest stop or campgrounds where he helped himself to a backpack where he'd been What he'd done, how he'd survived, was unknown. The EMTs were just about to load Mr. Gunderson into the back of the ambulance when Sully sat down on the porch steps with a loud huff. "Dad?" Maggie asked. Sully was grabbing the front of his chest over his heart. He was pale as snow, sweaty, his eyes glassy, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Dad!" Maggie shouted.